A married woman hires an attractive contractor to renovate her kitchen, and the two start to have an affair. However, things turn dark when the contractor becomes obsessive and makes the woman fear for her and her family's lives. Welcome back to Nonstop Recap. Today, we'll be going over the 2017 thriller Infidelity in Suburbia. The film opens with a couple as they start to get intimate in their room. A young boy opens the door to their room and his mom yells at him to give them some alone time. The boy doesn't leave, instead smiling and showing his mom a bloody collar and telling her that their dog got caught in a mouse trap. The film then cuts to a dock where we see a family setting up their boat. Laura is talking to her husband Greg about some kitchen renovations she would like to do, but he tells her that they don't really have the money for it right now. Their son Jamie is sitting nearby and helping with the boat while holding a pocket knife, and his mom warns him to be careful with it. Greg then gets a call from his assistant at work and walks away to take the phone call. Meanwhile, a nearby man named Elliott keeps looking over at Laura and is obsessively eavesdropping on her conversation with Greg. Laura knocks over a box while carrying some items, however, Elliott steps in and helps catch everything. Greg then comes back and hands Laura a newspaper with a report about a local arson case. The two start bickering because Laura doesn't trust Greg's assistant. Their fight gets interrupted when they hear a scream and realize that Jamie has fallen into the water. They rush over to the water as Elliott grabs Jamie and saves him. Jamie is mostly unharmed, and Greg and Laura profusely thank Elliott for saving their son. We then see Laura and Greg having a cookout with some of their friends as well as Elliott. Laura's friend Mira keeps talking about how hot Elliott is, and she says she wants to sleep with him. Laura reminds her that they're both married and says that she has no interest in sleeping with Elliott. Mira leaves to go make dinner for her own family as Laura and Greg invite Elliott inside to eat. He admires a painting on the wall and is blown away when he finds out it was painted by Laura. Laura then reveals that she used to sell her artwork, but she had to stop when Greg turned her studio into a workshop. Greg gets off the phone with his assistant after calling her beautiful, and it's obvious that Elliott also suspects Greg is having an affair. Laura and Greg find out that Elliott is a contractor, and Laura mentions that she's been wanting to do some renovations in her kitchen, but Greg is resistant. Elliott offers to do the work in the kitchen at a discounted rate, and the couple happily agree. That night, Greg tries to sleep with Laura, but she tells him she isn't in the mood, so Greg rolls over and goes to bed. We then see Laura and Mira going out for a job, and Mira continues to gush over how attractive Elliott is. Laura continues to deny it, but when she gets home, she sees Elliott working in the yard without a shirt on, and she can't help but stare at him. She goes down to discuss the renovations with him, and as he tells her about the plans, she keeps getting distracted by his body. Laura goes back into the house and begins to take a shower, and as she steps into the shower, Elliott passes by the open bathroom door and looks at her. Laura goes out shopping later that day and runs into Elliott. He compliments her design choices and says that she has a natural talent. She notices him holding food and asks about it. He essentially has her close her eyes before hand feeding her. Laura loves the food, and he tells her it's from a nearby bakery he used to go to with his mom whenever they were in town. Mira swings by Laura's house unannounced and finds Elliott once again working with his shirt off. She starts asking Greg questions about if he has a girlfriend, and Elliott says that he doesn't have a girlfriend, but he does have his eye on someone. Sometime later, Laura goes with Elliott to the docks and goes to check on her husband's boat. While on board, she notices a pair of women's underwear that aren't hers, and she realizes that Greg actually is having an affair. Elliott finds Laura upset, and she fills him in on the discovery. She then pulls up a photo of Greg's assistant Hannah from a dating site and sees her wearing the underwear in the photo. Laura goes over to Elliott's boat and he offers her tea and consoles her. Laura heads back home while Elliott cries in his boat over photos of his mom with her various unfaithful husbands. At home, Laura confronts Greg about Hannah, and Greg lies, but Laura knows the truth. Greg tries to get intimate with her, but Laura pushes him off. The next day, Laura comes downstairs and finds Jamie helping Elliott hammer some nails. She comments that Elliott is good with kids and asks if he wants some of his own. He He says that he does, but mentions that he would be perfectly happy being a stepdad. Jamie ends up leaving to go hang out with a friend for the day while Laura heads upstairs to take a shower. Elliott comes into the shower with her, and the two make out and presumably sleep together. We then see Laura at the dock where she sees various couples loving each other, making her uncomfortable. She finds Greg and he mentions that teenagers have been sneaking into people's boats to fool around. Laura brings up the purple underwear and Greg says that they must have come from the teenagers. Laura hugs Greg but obviously feels guilty about doubting him and about sleeping with Elliott. The film cuts to Elliott and Jamie as they play soccer and Mira stops by to flirt with Elliott a bit. Laura sends Jamie off to hang out with Mira's son Charlie while she has a private conversation with Elliott. Laura tries to break things off with Elliott, but he just seduces her and they once again sleep with each other. Back on his boat, Elliott starts cutting up photos of Greg and Laura, replacing Greg's face with photos of his own. Elliott shows up to the house the next morning with some flowers for Laura's birthday, stating that he knows everything about her. Greg comes out and is surprised to see the flowers, commenting that they're Laura's favorite before heading off to work. Laura and Elliott go inside the house and Laura says that they can't keep doing this. She then fires him as their contractor and asks him to leave. Sometime later, we see Laura coming home with Jamie and telling him that Elliott isn't going to work for them anymore. Laura looks around for Elliott but doesn't see him, making her sigh with relief. However, it's revealed that he's still creepily watching her. Laura goes over to Mira's house that night and it turns out that everyone threw her a surprise birthday party. Laura talks with Greg's assistant at the party and learns that the reason Greg had been out working late was because he was planning the party. Elliott is also there and gets introduced to Hannah, but all of his attention is on Laura and Greg. Hannah keeps flirting with Elliott all night and asks him to take her home with him. Later, Laura and Greg are in bed and Laura tries to confess what she's done, but Greg stops her. Laura gets a creepy text from Elliott that night, so she tells him to leave her alone. Elliott ends up fooling around with Hannah on his boat, although he clearly isn't that interested. Hannah gets upset when she realizes that he isn't turned on and goes to leave. However, she stops when she notices the photos of Laura. She calls Elliott crazy, which enrages him and causes him to choke and kill her. We see Laura watering her garden the next day when Greg comes over and begins to love on her while Elliott creepily watches. Greg tells Laura that once his sailing trip is over, he wants the two of them to spend more quality time together. Greg then heads off to work and Laura goes to put the hose back into the shed. When she walks in, she finds that it's been turned into an art studio with various signs that say she should be with Elliott instead of Greg. She then hears Jamie scream and runs into the house to check on him. Jamie says that Elliott was in the house, so Laura goes off looking for him. Laura finds Elliott outside and tells him to leave, but he acts obsessive toward her, stating that her relationship with Greg is over. He starts to grab and threaten Laura, causing her to scream. Jamie comes outside to check on his mom, and Elliott drives off in his truck. Laura does some research on Elliott and finds a review from someone called Purple Wallflower, stating that Elliott destroyed her life. Laura is able to track down Purple Wallflower and learns that the woman lost her family and marriage because of Elliott. She also says that Elliott is crazy and dangerous, encouraging Laura to find out what Elliott did to his mother. We then see a teenage girl walking along the docks when she drops her necklace in the water. She leans down to grab it, but instead finds Hannah's dead body. Mira and her husband hear the news on the TV and try to call Greg, but Greg is attacked from behind by Elliott. Laura hears the noise and grabs a bat before going to investigate. She hears the sounds of something breaking, and when she gets to the living room, she finds food from the bakery Elliott likes, as well as a broken window frame. Greg wakes up with his hands tied on Elliott's boat, but he manages to free himself. He finds the photos of Laura in the boat and gets attacked by Elliott, who says that Laura is his. We see Mira and Laura talking the next day, and Laura says it's weird that Greg is missing, but sometimes he'll just randomly go sailing for a few days. She then fills Mira in on the situation with Elliott. We see Laura head to the bakery that Elliott had mentioned, and she asks about Elliott. She learns that Elliott burned down his mother's house, but she is horrified when she finds out that Elliott was at the bakery that morning and was talking about how he was going to marry a widowed woman. Laura rushes home where she finds Elliott. Laura asks for Greg and Elliott begins to attack and threaten her. Jamie sees this happen, but Elliott tells him to go away. He then drags Laura up to the bedroom and ties her up. Laura pretends to be in love with him in order to trick him into letting her go. The two head downstairs for dinner with Jamie, and Laura hears Bill and Mira pull up outside the house. Laura tries to look at them through the window, however, Elliott realizes what's going on and sends Laura and Jamie upstairs. Elliott separates Laura and Jamie so he can try and be intimate with Laura, but Jamie opens the door to the bedroom. Elliott has flashbacks from his childhood, giving Laura the time to hit Elliott and run away. Laura has Jamie run for his life while Elliott knocks Laura unconscious with a hammer. He ties her up and brings her to his boat where she wakes up and stabs Elliott in the stomach. She sees a trail of blood on the dock and follows it to find Greg on a boat. She tries to call for help from the Coast Guard, but the line is dead. Elliott begins chasing and attacking Laura once again, and they end up on the second floor of a building. Laura kicks Elliott out of a window, and he dies on impact. The film then cuts forward, and we see Laura happily watching Greg and Jamie playing soccer through a window. Laura finds a cannoli from the bakery Elliott liked in the fridge and panics for a moment, only for Greg to show up and reveal that he was the one who bought it, as he happily starts eating it. Click on the videos on screen for more.